If we put all of these things together into intentionally creating a life for our dogs that is healthier, and on a day-to-day basis continue to make wise lifestyle choices, our estimates looking at this is that everything together could increase our dog's lifespan by at least 3 to 4 years.
We got a lot to get into. I'm sure we're going to touch on a lot of the stuff we covered before. It's been a number of years, but we got a lot of new stuff to get into. I love the new book, and I think a good place to start off, because this would arguably be the most foundational piece of raising a healthy dog, would be the diet. And there's so many different types of diets out there. The raw food diet over the last number of years has been getting so much momentum and popularity. Let's begin to sort through that. Let's talk about the wide spectrum and what people can look at when it comes to making a healthy choice.
Certainly, you are spot on that diet is that foundational of, in the Forever Dog book, we kind of follow what the Broad Institute says are the most important epigenetic triggers, which are those things we can do in the environment that actually can up or down regulate our DNA. So diet is, of course, probably the biggest thing because it's the one thing we're doing on a daily basis that we can use food to heal or harm. And because food does both of those things, we want to make sure that we're choosing food wisely, obviously. So yes, diet is kind of the first step of creating a lifelong intentional wellness plan to make your dogs and cats live as long as possible. So food really matters. Food is actually information to our animal's body. So you want to make sure that you're nourishing your animals with appropriate information, nutrients, cofactors, enzymes, polyphenols, antioxidants, all those things that need to be found in fresh, whole, live, minimally processed foods. They're really important, which then begs the question, if we've been feeding ultra-processed foods for the last 100 years to our animals, what has the impact of that been on their DNA? And how can we use food then to help our animals recover nutritionally from not necessarily being nourished in a way that has extended their lifespan? So it's a valuable, valid question. The cool thing is it's not just us asking these questions. The entire fresh food movement is happening from the ground up. It's armies of people becoming advocates for their dogs and cats, recognizing, you know what? It's really crazy that my veterinarian's recommending only ultra-processed food. My grandma thinks otherwise. My pediatrician says otherwise. My human nutritionist is telling me otherwise. Everyone is telling me to eat more fresh, unadulterated living foods and eat less fast food, except my vet. So I do like the fact that food has become a front and center issue with people thinking outside the box, including, I'm not sure my food category is good. In the spectrum of food processing, there's raw, and that may work for some people and not for everyone, which is cool. But then there's gently cooked, which means brand new fresh food that's lightly, flash cooked, flash poached, but the nutrients are still there. Then there's air dried or dehydrated, freeze dried foods, and then there's air baked, and then there's oven baked, and then there's extruded or canned food, which are those foods that have been cooked 4 times. So they're high heat processed 4 times, and it's a little bit like us eating ultra processed foods all the time. There's not a whole lot of nutrition left. So it does beg the question, what are humans doing then to recognize that their animals need more? And it's caused quite a controversy. I think the last time we talked about this was 5 years ago. Certainly the fresh food industry has become front and center, the fastest growing segment of the pet food industry. Do you remember, Jesse, 5 years ago when we talked, or whenever we talked, I think it was still at maybe the 3 to 4%. I probably mentioned to you as this teeny tiny sliver, but I think we've made quite a bit of headway.
It seems like we have. And one thing that jumps out at me as you explain all that is the fact that vets aren't yet on board when it comes to eating this minimally processed diet. So the big question is, why not?
Exactly. So you have to remember that the number one pet food company in the world, it's the Mars Candy Bar Company, who owns the vast majority of the major pet food brands that you are familiar with at Walmart or Target or big box stores. And even those prescription diets, so, Royal Canin is made by Mars. So even those prescription veterinary diets sold through veterinary channels are made by Mars Candy Bar Company. The second biggest pet food company in the world is the Hershey Chocolate Bar Company. So Hershey, so we've got Mars number 1, Hershey's number 2, and then we have Smucker's Jam Jelly Company number 3, and then we have Colgate Palmolive number 4. Those companies make up 85% of our pet food sales. And those companies also have relationships with every single veterinary school around the world. So every vet school is sponsored or endowed, or however you want to say it. They have a professional contractual relationship with one of these pet food giants. So the veterinary students graduating from accredited veterinary schools around the world are being educated by these massive ultra processed pet food companies. And that really is the bulk of their nutrition education. So, of course, those companies are not talking about fresh foods or living foods or nutritional diversity or how to improve the microbiome. They're not having any of those discussions because it wouldn't meld well with the products that they can then sell as veterinarians post graduation. So veterinarians, it's not, I would argue, it's not that veterinarians are opposed to fresh food. It's that because we weren't taught it in veterinary school, nor will we be because of these relationships, none of those giant pet food companies produce any living, whole, fresh, or even minimally processed foods. All they make is ultra processed foods. So we're in this quandary of, if what we've recommended for 50 years as professionals is only ultra processed foods, and if we admit that there's a chance that ultra processed foods may not be the healthiest things we could be nourishing our pets with, like, how do you backpedal from that? You really can't. So there's two options: bash it and say, oh my gosh, don't do it, it could be dangerous or wrong, even though every health professional in the world is recommending more fresh foods except us. Or the big guys are going to have to buy up little fresh food, so these innovative human grade fresh pet food companies that are popping up all over the country that are massively busy making great profits with brand new clients, all going from the ultra processed industry to the fresher side. Those companies are going to be hot commodities because these big pet food giants are going to either have to get a piece of the pie and to play in the pet food game when it comes to knowledgeable people making better choices for food. They're going to have to either produce a better quality food or buy a company producing a better quality food. So veterinarians graduate saying, I don't know anything about that food, so I just recommend that you don't feed it. Some veterinarians, of course, conceptually have a hard time thinking outside the box and just say, you know what, I have seen people do homemade diets wrong. And I have too, Jesse. I think that's an important piece to remember, that when we think about fresher food diets, a lot of people automatically assume that that means homemade diets. And homemade diets are amazing if they're done correctly, which means if those pet parents are following a recipe to guarantee nutritional adequacy, so they know that they're feeding foods that are meeting their animals' nutritional requirements, they can be amazing. But every veterinarian around the world has seen people guess at how to make healthy pet food, and then they guess wrong. So by default, veterinarians are lovely people. They don't want your dog or cat to be harmed. So what we tend to recommend professionally is, listen, I don't know anything about it. I'm not sure it's safe or smart. Maybe you shouldn't do it. And pet parents walk away thinking, my veterinarian says it's probably not a good idea. And that's just from lack of training in vet school. Here's the cool thing. I believe since we last talked, the literally millions at this point of empowered pet parents that are going to drive the bus for their animals' well-being, they're intentionally in charge of making excellent decisions for their animals. They're totally cool saying, I'm fine feeding this food. I've seen the benefits. I've done the research. I feel totally comfortable. And they, as clients, are leading their veterinarians to being able to relax into feeding better quality food. So it's pretty cool. It's the patients and the clients helping to shift the veterinary perspective, which I love.
And when it comes to eating these foods, we'll just there is a spectrum here, and we're going to cover the full spectrum and talk about different parts of it. But when it comes to the raw foods, do the vets have any argument against why these aren't good for people to be consuming? Well, people, dogs.
Yeah. And really, there's two big arguments when it comes to raw food. One of them is nutritional adequacy, which I just kind of covered briefly. Let me tell you why there's a lot of confusion about raw foods in general, because when you think about foods that dogs and cats traditionally eat, canned and kibbled food, you can't make those at home, right? No one's ever going to make homemade crunchy dry food for their dog. You can't. No one has the equipment to do that. And no one's going to make canned pet food for their animals. You can't. No one has a canning factory. So this concept of homemade pet food is confusing for people and for vets because honestly, it's the first time that people have recognized, you know what, I have the opportunity to actually do this at home, where you can't do that with canned and kibble food. Homemade diets raw diets, as you mentioned, people can cook their food and then it's a cooked homemade diet, obviously. And that removes one of the fears that veterinarians have. Veterinarians have a fear that even though dogs and cats can tolerate higher levels of potentially pathogenic bacteria, there certainly is a risk that you buying meat at the grocery store in the same butcher deli department that you would be buying fresh whole meats for your family for the barbecue, those meats may harbor bacteria like E. coli and Salmonella and Listeria. And those bacteria, if they are around immunocompromised people or if they're not handled correctly, just as the raw meat headed for your barbecue, there is a risk of humans getting sick from potentially pathogenic bacteria. So that's a really important thing to remember. If you decide to do homemade diets, then it's important that you take into account that that raw fresh meat needs to be handled exactly as you would handle meat for the barbecue for your family. So that's concern number one for veterinarians, is making sure that humans don't get sick. And what I would tell everyone listening or watching is that as you would handle fresh meats for your barbecue and your family, you would need to handle your fresh meat dog food made from those exact same quality meats the exact same way. So you've got to be cognizant of washing your cutting boards, washing your knives, washing your utensils that you make any raw meat products with. So by doing that, we've eliminated the concern for bacteria. Now, the other nice thing is that if you say, well, listen, I don't want to make my own dog's food, this sector of the pet food industry called the commercially available raw food segment is one of the fastest growing segments of the pet food industry. And commercially available raw foods made in the US fall under FSMA, which is the Food Safety Modernization Act, which means they have to adhere to a zero tolerance policy. So one of the things, Jesse, I tell my clients is you can kind of get a feel of how fresh food literate your veterinarian is by asking how concerned they are or what level of regulation goes in to commercially available raw food diets. And if your veterinarian says, oh my gosh, they're regulated stricter than human foods, then your veterinarian is fresh food literate. They understand that because pet foods fall under the Food Safety Modernization Act, there's a zero tolerance for salmonella in commercially available raw pet foods. Zero. Not 10%, not 8%, zero. So commercial raw food diets have to be controlled for pathogens. So that should allow everyone listening to say, oh my gosh, that makes me feel so much better that is happening. Homemade diets don't. That means quality control is in your hands. The onus of responsibility to making sure that you're practicing safe meat handling techniques rests on you. Likewise, Jesse, making sure that you're following a recipe that meets your dogs and cats' bare bones minimum nutritional requirements is really important. Probably the biggest issue veterinarians have. Actually, I think more so than the bacteria issue in raw foods, Jesse, I think the biggest issue is people get online, they find a recipe that says add a little bit of kelp and alfalfa and some calcium and some ground beef and some peas and carrots and Brussels sprouts and you're good to go. And that's what veterinarians struggle with, because even though that sounds like a balanced diet, that diet is deficient in vitamin D and vitamin E. And probably if I were to do the math and put it in my spreadsheet and look at what's it deficient, probably 8 to 10 nutrients are not being met with a diet that on paper looks pretty darn good. So veterinarians' second big concern about raw diets is people do them wrong. And Jesse, the truth is, people do them wrong. So how can we help decrease our veterinarians from having fear of homemade diets? We can follow a recipe that assures nutritional adequacy, and we can guarantee our veterinarians that we are doing safe handling techniques at home with the fresh meat products that we're handling. Now, here's what's interesting. I already mentioned that raw foods in the commercial industry have to adhere to that same human zero tolerance policy that is actually only found in pet foods, not necessarily all human meat products coming out of the supermarket. So believe it or not, in this regard, raw meat pet food products are held to a higher food safety standard than human meats, which is interesting. But in addition to that, Jesse, since the last time we talked, there's an interesting technique that has come about called HPP, which is basically high pressure pasteurization that allows raw meat products to undergo an FDA approved technique that makes the food sterile. So my concluding remark is this: if you're freaked out about bacteria, but you want the benefits of raw food, you can actually buy sterile, nutritionally complete raw food diets. And that's an option as well. So if you talk to your veterinarian about those two big issues, I promise that if I do a homemade diet, I'll follow a recipe that is nutritionally complete and I know how to handle meat safely. Your veterinarian will say, okay, most of the time. I mean, those are the two biggest issues with veterinarians. And you have to remember, coming from a place of your veterinarian wanting to protect you and your animal, those are some viable concerns. But if you can talk to your veterinarian logically and explain that you're an educated pet owner and you're aware of these issues and you have every intention of not allowing nutritional inadequacy to ever be a problem, your veterinarian will take a very deep breath and then partner with you and affirm you on your goal of improving your animal's nutrition through homemade diets. Yeah. So I think those are the two biggest topics that we've got to cover.
And when it comes to the HPP, do you have any concerns on the meat becoming sterile like that, or do you think the quality is the same?
So I traditionally speaking, I'm not a fan of feeding sterile foods unless you have to. Now, remember, are some medical reasons why sometimes we do feed sterile food. For instance, if I have an animal undergoing chemotherapy and they want the benefits of fresh food, and owners also don't want the tag-alongs that happen with ultra processed foods. So canned foods and dry foods, you probably are aware of this. When we heat foods to high temperatures, some unwanted chemical reactions take place in the food called advanced glycation end products, which actually are undeniable in terms of creating organ disease, kidney disease, pancreatitis, liver disease, heart disease, but also immune system reactions on both ends of the spectrum. So both allergic issues and cancers, all related to these unwanted byproducts of high heat food processing. My 2.0 pet parents say, I am not going to feed those. My animal already has cancer. I'm not going to feed known carcinogens to an animal fighting cancer. I'm not doing it. But my animal's also undergoing chemo and they have no immune system. What do I do? That's when sterile raw foods are a total blessing. If you have an animal that has expressed, a kitty that has expressed feline leukemia, or or FIV, they're immunosuppressed because of a viral infection, that may be an indication. Looking at their white blood cell count. If you have an animal with a low white blood count, sterile raw foods may be their friend. Traditionally speaking, Jesse, I'm not a fan of feeding sterile raw foods forever and ever because I'm a huge believer and junkie of an animal's microbiome. The best thing we can do for our animals is build a diverse, resilient, strong microbiome, that community of microbes in our dogs and cats' guts that really set the foundation of how resilient their immune system is. So sterile raw foods don't do an amazing job of building microbiome resilience. So if you opt to feed a sterile food, you'd want to do things like add in probiotics and add in other prebiotic fibers and give your dog access to clean, fresh, microbial rich soil, which is demonstrated now in several studies to be really good for an animal's immune system, is getting them outdoors and exposed to beneficial, good, healthy soil. So there are things you can do to offset eating a sterile diet your whole life, but to answer your question, if I had an animal that had to eat sterile food, fantastic. Or if I lived with a human that was HIV positive and my animal needed to eat sterile food, I would do it because I believe the benefits of sterile raw food are far, far, far greater than any benefit of an ultra processed, highly refined diet.
And with all these raw foods coming onto the market, what is it we should look for? And now we're talking about just them in a classical sense, not the HPP. Is it kind of like when it comes to human food where we want to look for organic, free range, if it's fish, wild caught? Like what is it that's going to differentiate the different foods at that upper echelon?
So that actually all depends on your own personal food philosophy. And that actually is one of the things that you probably read in the book. Part of me co-writing The Forever Dog was trying to help dog owners identify what their own personal food philosophy is, which means some people really care about not eating glyphosate or Roundup, in which case organic would be really important for you. And some people don't give two hoots if their nutrients come from synthetic multivitamins or supplements, or if their nutrients come from real whole living foods. So the issues that surround food are entirely unique to our own vantage point. So if you care about ethically sourced, free range, whole food nutrients, then yes, here's the good news. There are companies and brands out there that can provide amazing products to fill that niche. And that's the great thing about fresher foods being the fastest growing segment of the pet food industry is you can literally find whatever you're looking for. If you're looking for a super economical way to feed fresher foods, then you would use factory farmed meats and you would not use free range, ethically sourced, wild caught meats. But the cool thing, Jesse, is you can find commercially available fresher food diets to fit all of those needs. So whether you need a novel protein source and you're looking for buffalo and goat, you can get raw, gently cooked, dehydrated, and freeze dried, nutritionally complete meals made from goat now, which is pretty darn amazing. That was not part of our conversation 5 years ago, but that shows you how far the fresher food industry has come, which is awesome. And I might add, especially during COVID, many of these really innovative companies are doing amazing customer service. Like, hey, we'll mail pre-weighed out food specifically for your dog's body weight and activity level to your door. Tell us what day you want the repeated shipment mailed, and you have this beautiful service of human grade, perfectly portioned meals arriving at your door on a schedule. We've come a long way in terms of nourishing our dogs better, but also making it convenient and easy for owners to do.
That's incredible. And you bring up something interesting there because one of the many problems with conventional kibble is the fact that a lot of people are probably using that same kibble over, months or even years, and the dog's having no variety within the diet. So when it comes to, again, when we get to that upper level and we're using the fresh foods, what are your recommendations when it comes to switching up the protein over time?
It's a great question. There's no right or wrong way to add variety to your dog or cat's diet. So if you live in an efficiency apartment, you have just one tiny refrigerator freezer, you're not going to buy 5 or 6 different brands and bags and flavors and rotate every day. In that situation, you would feed down, half a bag. You would switch brands and proteins, get a second bag, and as you mix your new bag with your old bag, and as you use up your first bag, creating no GI upset, you're going to slowly mix in, the brand new food, 10% new food, 90% old food the first day, and then 80% old food, 20, and then 70-30, 60-40. And as you use up your current bag of dog food, and wean on to your new bag of dog food that is a different brand and different protein, you are innately developing microbial diversity. You're giving a different brand, which is using a different protein and is using a different premix and using a different source of veggies and using different sources of vitamins and minerals. And all of those changes are incredibly beneficial to your dog or cat. And by doing this slowly in this way, you're not going to cause GI upset or vomiting or indigestion. It's just a slow, easy transition off of one protein and brand and onto the next. And probably the second question I get from people is, well, how many times should I rotate? And what I tell my clients is, listen, if you're blessed to have an independent pet store that has 17 brands and 36 different proteins, just go through them all. Like you could just, buy small bags and you can go through this rotation of all of these different flavors and all of these different proteins in a year. You can rotate through all 36 brands, proteins, and flavors. And just think of what we're doing. Some of the research, Jesse, about microbiome diversification is really shocking. And what that research shows is that the more variety we can provide in terms of different types of veggies and different types of fruits and different types of what we call prebiotic fibers, which are this low glycemic roughage that dogs and cats actually really need, not just for microbiome health, but actually to produce some of the key energy molecules and even some vitamins in the GI tract, as well as things like serotonin, all gut biome, all necessary for some major nutrients, hormones, and cofactors to be made. The only time that our pets can make those is when we're doing things to intentionally diversify their gut and feeding the same food. The only company that wants you to feed the same food every day for your animal's whole life is the company that's selling you the product. No microbiologist, no doctor, no any healthcare professional would ever say that that's a smart idea. In fact,
Wasn't that a common myth though back in the day? People would say it's not good to switch up the protein.
and who do you think started? Who do you think started that myth? If you were the CEO of a pet food company and you wanted a client for life, what's the best way to fearmonger people into never switching their food? Tell them it would be terrible for your animal, right? It could be very bad. You could hurt your dog if you switch foods. That's a scary statement, right?
Yeah. Well, one thing I noticed reading the book, it was really apparent to me, is the fact that a lot of the principles that you guys are sharing in this new book, they apply to humans as well. So, and naturally, when you start making some of these upgrades, whether it be taking, tap water and starting to filter it. Hopefully, if people aren't doing that for themselves, they would take on that upgrade in their own life as well, or getting exercise or rebuilding the microbiome, on and on and on. There's this parallel throughout the book of upgrade for dog, upgrade for human. And we are very, even though we're two different species, we're very similar in a lot of ways.
So true. In fact, not only did kind of man and beast, man and dog, humans and Canis lupus familiaris, we co-evolved for the last tens of thousands of years. And at this point, we share our beds with our dogs. We share our home with our dogs. In fact, the Environmental Working Group, one of my favorite research organizations, is starting to do translational research because they realize that dogs are actually the perfect sentinel in the home to determining how healthy the home is for human children. Dogs are naked. They don't take showers very often. They roll around on the floor. By evaluating the chemical load on dogs, we get a good idea of the chemical load in people's homes. And this has been incredibly eye-opening. When we talk to some of the top longevity experts, they not only were intentionally studying well-loved dogs in average homes, their response was if we can identify dogs' risks of environmental contaminant loads, pollutants, and secondary sources of factors that were decreasing longevity, that plays directly into that home environment where all family members would be equally affected by the same variables. So dogs are a beautiful way of inspiring us if we don't feel like cleaning up our home or getting out and exercising ourselves or filtering our tap water because it's a pain and we actually like the way that our city water tastes, or we drink out of plastic cups and we don't think that we can taste, we can't taste that there's a problem. We automatically assume that our dogs are in the same boat. But after you read the research, it's really hard to keep making those decisions once you know better. When you have more information and when you can see the science, a lot of people change for their dogs. And we call that health traveling up the leash, which means we don't necessarily love ourselves and make great choices for ourselves for a variety of different reasons. We're tired. We don't think we're worthy. We've got enough going on. We've got a whole family that needs us and we're being pulled in a million different directions. But when educating moms and dads in the house about what happens if you don't make these changes, there's this entire shift that happens in the home towards health, wellness, and the removal of potential variables that are high risk and decrease well-being, health span and lifespan across the board, research tells us. And isn't it wonderful that there again, we've got this amazing relationship with animals, and in one way, because dogs live and die in such a dramatically short period of time, we're able to evaluate their lifestyles in a much shorter, compact way that allows us to pivot and make changes on an ongoing basis that actually dramatically impact our dog's well-being and lifespan. So in one way, it's terrifying, but another way, it's super inspiring because we have a lot of work we need to do in 12 years period of time. Yeah.
I love that idea of health going up the leash, or however you worded it there, because in my case, my wife and I were interested in alternative health and health and wellness, and that traveled the other way toward the dog when we got our puppy. And I love the idea of it being full circle and coming the other way around too.
Yeah. And just along that same vein, I think it's healthier when when healthy, happy humans decide, you know what, I have, maybe a two-legged family member, and now I'm going to adopt or get a dog and include this four-legged family member. I'm going to extend the exact same health principles to my dog that I did to the rest of my family. I love that because, Jesse, there's less guilt. What I have seen, and we cover this in the book, that sometimes your vet loves you and loves your dog, but doesn't necessarily go over these. We don't have hour-long veterinary appointments where we cover how to intentionally manage weight, how to prevent cancer from occurring, how do you prevent arthritis and degenerative joint disease from occurring in your dog at 5 years of age, how do you intentionally build muscle mass in a senior dog that's undergoing this shrinking, atrophying process. Let's talk about this, because between this visit and next visit, your dog is going to shrink and become weaker, which is going to lead to the potential for more arthritis. Those conversations, sadly, are not taking place regularly in the veterinary office yet, might I say. Proactive veterinarians like myself, we are really pushing to have the shift in health paradigm from this disease paradigm to a wellness proactive medicine paradigm. And I do believe that it's happening. But until those are normal conversations at those annual wellness exams, people are left being inspired and empowered and educated enough to make good choices on their own. There's nothing more heartbreaking than realizing losing a dog or a kitty, losing anything and realizing I didn't know enough to make the right decisions. And I am overcome with guilt and sadness and remorse that then rolls into anger and frustration and a bunch of bad things, a bunch of bad emotions because we didn't have enough knowledge to make good decisions. That I'm so thankful that it was not you with your wife and any of your kids, 2 or 4-legged. I'm so thankful. But the truth is that is a lot of people, and the guilt that comes along with saying, I made mistakes and I will never let that happen again. It's awful. And Jesse, that's part of the reason I also wrote this book is 25 years into my veterinary career. If I can do anything to help people put their head on their pillow at night and say, I did the best I could with the knowledge that I had, and I feel confident that I was able to make the best decisions, that's creating a forever dog. And that's living a proactive wellness path with the intention of never being heartbroken by not having the information you need. It's a big step.
I love that. And I want to make sure we move beyond food, but there's still a lot more to cover in this area. And it is so important before we move forward. And I think an important thing we do, because we've talked about so many different qualities along the continuum of food, if you could quickly take us from top to bottom, in your opinion, just to leave people, if they're a little bit confused at the end of all that information we shared, where they might want to begin on that spectrum.
Well, when we think about healthy food, we always have to take into context what species are we feeding. So, as a wildlife biologist, my degree before being a veterinarian, you know, a perfect food for a carnivore was not ideal for, a vegan horse that eats grass. That's an ideal diet. So, unsprayed, wild, harvested, beautiful, healthy grass is a perfect diet for a horse or a cow, a goat, not a perfect diet for a dog or a wolf or a coyote or a jackal. Now, carnivores will nibble grasses, and eating less toxic grass is a great idea. But the fact is, first and foremost, we have to identify what's biologically appropriate nutrition for the species that we're nourishing. So kitties are obligate carnivores. That kind of says it all. Dogs are scavenging carnivores or facultative carnivores. I'll even go so far as saying carnivorous omnivores, which is all of the scientists arguing the fact that dogs absolutely can and will digest plants. No problem. And they can and they will. Dogs, all species of dogs, whether we're talking wild Canis lupus wolves or domesticated dogs and all of the different types of animals they're in, they'll all forage on grasses, not just to build their microbiome, but to get certain nutrients. Some grasses are purgatives, some grasses enhance digestion, some grasses contain key enzymes, nutrients, phytonutrients that those animals need. But that doesn't mean that in and of themselves is a perfect food source for them. So when we think about dogs and cats, first and foremost, a great diet would follow an evolutionary diet for them, which would be high in moisture. So dogs and cats, I don't feel thrive eating entirely dehydrated, dried food their whole life. They're meant to eat some moisture in their food. So high moisture, low carbohydrate. Dogs and cats don't have a carb requirement. So they need none. It's okay to give them some carbs, no big deal. But and remember, when I say carbs, there's good carbs, which are the roughage, low glycemic, amazing fiber-filled prebiotic that nourish the microbiome. And then there's the bad carbs, which are the highly refined corn, wheat, rice, starches that just result in pre-diabetic states in animals. So they don't offer a whole lot of nutrition other than a lot of calories and a lot of sugar. Unnecessary for dogs and cats. So the take-home message for any food you want to feed in terms of that scale of good, better, best, high moisture, low carbohydrate, excellent source of protein, and moderate amount of healthy and adulterated fat. So what is healthy and adulterated fat? What we know to be true about all nutrients is that the less that they are refined or processed, the more whole food nutrition is still left in the food. So the common sense take-home message would be feed the best quality food you can afford to feed. And when we say quality, that means least heat processed, that you can afford to feed. Most people end up saying I can actually afford to feed my animals a homemade diet. I just don't necessarily want to take the time to make it. And then this is when we go back to that whole question of it's cheaper to feed our kids through the dollar menu, which it is, than buying organic produce and foods at your local grocery store and then going home and then making them and then cleaning up. It's a complete pain. It's a complete pain to nourish yourself well. It is way easier and sometimes tastes better to go through the dollar menu, but that is not necessarily a path of health day after day. So when it comes to homemade meals, it's the cheapest way to nourish your dogs and cats with the foods the ingredients that you can identify. That is the best way because you can see what you're feeding, you know when you prepared it, you know the quality of the raw materials that you made it with, and you can feel good about feeding that to your animal. The downside is you do have to follow a recipe and you have to have time to do that. If you say, I don't even cook for myself, I'm not about to cook for my animals, then you're left that the next category would be purchasing food. That would be raw or sterile raw, both of them having to be pathogen controlled. Next best that follows that high moisture, low carb, high protein, moderate fat model would be freeze dried because that's basically raw food that's freeze dried. And so those nutrients have been preserved quickly. And then you would reconstitute that and feed that to your dog or cat. Dehydrated food is the next least processed, and freeze-dried and dehydrated in many categories can be very similar, if not equal. But it depends on the temperature at which the food was dehydrated and how much starch or carbs are in the food. So one of the things you'll see in Forever Dog and that we talk a lot about is looking at how many carbs are in your pet food. And that's a really important equation that a lot of people, even listening or watching, have probably already done. You have to know how many carbs are in your pet food to be able to know how biologically appropriate it is. So once you've determined that and you can find then what category you can purchase in terms of economics, freeze-dried, dehydrated are all in those fresher food categories. Above the dehydrated category, when we get into air-dried, the question would be what temperature? Air-baked, the question would be what temperature? And then oven-baked, canned, and extruded all fall into that 4 times high heat process category. And that's where all of those byproducts come in that we're really high heat byproducts come in that we're trying to really avoid. So on that category of best foods or fresher, it's the dehydrated, freeze dried, gently cooked, raw or sterile raw, homemade that allow you to take a deep breath and say, there's probably still a lot of nutrients left in these categories of fresher foods. If you can only feed the other half of the scale, which is the ultra refined, high heat processed pet foods, don't beat yourself up. But then you just got to remember, I'm basically going to do dollar menu for all my kids' meals. And then in between dollar menu, I'm going to offer them real food snacks. So for the only snacks are going to be blueberries and fresh living whole food. So if you're stuck feeding only an ultra processed diet, my take home message is don't beat yourself up. Some people say, listen, all I can afford is Old Roy, and don't make me feel guilty about that. And that's the last thing any of us should do. How do we make Old Roy better? When you chop off the top and bottom of your carrots, feed them to your dog. You know, when you're making sandwiches and you're slicing up veggies and fruits and meats, mix some of that in with your Old Roy. You can use table scraps. In fact, Dr. Anna Bjorkman, who is an amazing researcher out of Helsinki Veterinary School, she runs the dog risk program. She just published a great paper about how using healthy table scraps, which made the industry melt down because that term table scraps, remember, it's not pizza crust and Hot Pockets. It's healthy human foods that have not been heat processed, but sharing all the dented, bruised fruits and veggies out of our fridge that we may not eat, that's the best way to not only recycle food that you may not want to eat, but actually build your animal's microbiome that otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity to eat fresh, whole, real foods. So if you have to feed ultra-processed food, give all raw, fresh food snacks. If you can afford to feed less processed food, then do so, and still give all raw snacks.
When it comes to feeding dogs stuff from the fridge, actual human quote unquote food, I know for myself, even to this day, until reading this new book, there were certain food items that I was questioning whether it was good for the dog or not.
Yeah.
And I love how you guys in this book really break it down in a simple way because I think that can be a barrier for a lot of people for including those into the dog's diet.
Huge.
So break it down for us here. It's really not that many foods that people need to be concerned about.
It isn't, Jesse. And in fact, that's a big chunk of the book, is humans have such profound food fears that this is actually what prevents them from sharing anything. In fact, I just think about my Facebook page where when I post, hey, share some blueberries with your dogs, the number of people that say, you can't give blueberries to dogs, you'll kill them. It's overwhelming. Like humans have been conditioned to never give anything to their animals. And so we do have a steep re-education curve for millions of pet parents out there who still believe that anything other than pet food could be detrimental. So that's hurdle number one. The best and easiest way I can pare down what foods you need to avoid. And the first thing I want to talk about is there's a difference between toxic foods and foods that are unhealthy. There's a big difference. Toxic foods will kill your animals. Unhealthy foods just can have health consequences. So let's just first differentiate toxic from unhealthy. The European Pet Food Council, which is called FEDIAF, the Federation of European Pet Food Manufacturers, lists 4 foods that should not be fed to any dogs or cats because they're toxic. Chocolate, which we know. Members of the onion family, so leeks, onions, chives. Garlic extract in high doses can be a problem. So I'm not a big fan of garlic extract or garlic pills. Fresh raw garlic, okay, but no onions whatsoever. No chocolate, macadamia nuts, and grapes. That also includes raisins. That's it. So knowing that most people know about the chocolate, right? The 2 things we have to remember is no onions, no grapes. Macadamia nuts, avoid that too. Now, here's what's interesting. We haven't found the toxin in macadamia nuts yet. We don't know why they make dogs puke, but they do. The suspicion is they may not even be toxic per se, but because they're so high in fat, what they cause is raging GI issues, so still don't give them. But that being said, Jesse, now that we've identified the foods that are toxic, no grapes, no raisins, no onions, no chocolate, when you open up your fridge, now let's talk about foods that aren't healthy for your pets. We have to remember that certain foods, even healthy foods, may contain a choking hazard, like cherries have a pit and a stem. If you give a tiny dog a whole fresh cherry with a stem, the stem can get caught in their throat, the pit can get stuck somewhere. So those are innate risks. But just remember, Jesse, just because a cherry has a pit and a stem doesn't mean that cherries are toxic. And yet, when you go on the vast majority of websites, you will hear things like, don't feed cherries to dogs. And they don't list why, when the why is it could be a choking hazard. So the lists of food on the ASPCA website, the AKC website, the Humane Society of the United States, the list of foods that you should avoid, there's hundreds of foods on those lists. But they're choking hazards, or they're people making bad decisions. Like, my dog loves watermelon, so I'm going to give him an entire watermelon, which in turn causes blowout explosive diarrhea. So part of the equation when you open your fridge is common sense. We recommend that you chop all fruits and veggies into very small bite-sized pieces. If you have a finicky dog, you can actually grate them into your dog food bowl. You can hide them in their current food. Obviously, organic produce is safer because it doesn't have pesticide residues or glyphosate residues sprayed on it. And if the fruit has a pit or stem, like peaches, you would want to remove any type of choking hazard. Those are the rules. Now, some foods are higher in nutrition than others. So some of the veggies we recommend avoiding. I'm not a big fan of just feeding dogs white potatoes or corn because it's just a ton of starch and there's a reason why sadly superfoods, potato and corn are not on the superfoods list. They're delicious and they're super good, but they are not superfoods. So the other common sense thing I would say is when you open up your fridge to share your bounty with your dog, think about what has the highest nutrient value. Because even sharing a teaspoon of that, Jesse, taking a teaspoon of kibble or canned food out and putting in a teaspoon of whatever is in your fridge offers exponential gains when it comes to micronutrients, enzymes, phytonutrients, polyphenols. It's these little tiny adds that make great big gains in the longevity and wellness space. That includes fresh herbs. So the herbs I don't recommend, obviously leeks and chives, no nutmeg either, but a little bit of fresh oregano, amazing. A little bit of fresh ginger or turmeric, amazing on your dog or cat's food. So there's a lot of easy, simple hacks that if you maybe can't afford an amazing all raw, species appropriate, free range, ethically sourced organic diet, these simple hacks from your kitchen can go a long way in hyper nourishing your dog or cat.
Yeah, no, I love that. Such important information. And even somebody like myself and my wife who have taken the time to go so deep in the research on holistic, pet care, I was timid, and I'm definitely going to start expanding my dog Goji's array of, like you said, herbs too. Maybe even take some turmeric, like get some organic turmeric and sprinkle
Absolutely.
that on every other day, and some ginger powder. Like, have fun with that and feel this new freedom that, thanks to you, I have. So that's great.
So good. It's so good.
And when it comes to food, one last area we have to cover, and this is something I haven't heard anybody else in the pet space talk about, and this is time restricted eating. So this is so popular when it comes to, the health and wellness space for humans right now. It's something I practice and think is just such a powerful tool, but it isn't something I've really given a lot of thought of when it comes to my own dog. And you guys really share a lot of information on this and how powerful it can be. So let's talk about where somebody would start. Let's assume somebody doesn't even do this for themselves at this point, and this is a totally new concept. And then talk about how we can use that as a tool for our pets.
Yeah. One of the things, when we interviewed the top longevity researchers around the world, we made notes of the things that every single one of them told us. And that was kind of when every single longevity expert told us, the goal is to get through life with whoever releases the least amount of insulin wins. And I thought that was really interesting. The goal is to keep your blood sugar and insulin low. The goal is to support your organ function all through life. So when all of the top longevity researchers mentioned to us that all of the longest lived mammals that they studied, whether it was groups of wild animal populations, whether it was groups of humans, whether it was certain ethnicities, or whether it was certain groups of dogs, the one thing that all of these mammals had in common was that they had periods of not constant digestion. And I find this really interesting. When we asked Brian McLaren, the owner of the oldest dog in the world out of Australia, Maggie, a 30-year-old Kelpie, when Rodney finished that interview and said, "Listen, Brian, what's the one take-home message that you would give, like just one tip about food?" Brian said, "Feed your dog less." And here's what's interesting. We know that obesity and overweight animals, 60% of well-loved dogs in the US are carrying extra weight. And that is because we love them a lot. We overfeed them and we undermove them. And a lot like humans, we tend to eat more than we burn, and we are in a slow cycle of gaining weight. Every single longest lived and extra long lived dog that we also evaluated and talked to their owners, those owners intentionally created pockets. And I want to be clear, we're not talking about starving an animal. We're talking about intentionally creating an opportunity where there's time when the body has a chance to repair and restore itself. So it's not denying your animal any calories. We're feeding the exact same number of calories. We're just doing it strategically. Here's what's interesting. We have the farmer in Australia that says, feed your dog fewer calories. And then I interviewed Dr. David Sinclair, the top longevity expert coming out of Harvard, and he had the exact same response. I said, "Dr. Sinclair, if you could give one tip to dog owners around the world," he said, "feed less food and feed them less often." The more that dogs can catch a break and go into repair and restore mode, the longer you are adding their both health and lifespan, you are adding to their overall well-being. And I found it interesting that farmers with common sense and the most brilliant, highly educated scientists around the world have all come to similar conclusions, one by studying it and the other by living it with extra long-lived dogs, like a 30-year-old Kelpie. Every single scientist that we talked to talked about the amazing restorative, rejuvenative benefits of allowing the body time to go through the natural recycling and cleaning up process called autophagy, which is when our body does not have to digest food. We can go through this cleaning house and cleaning up cells and recycling parts and getting rid of toxins and getting our body back into amazing working order. But it has to happen during periods where we don't have food in our bellies. Dogs are evolutionarily adapted for starvation. And if you think about it, up until 100 years ago, there was no dog food. Dogs either hunted, ate scraps. We fed them leftovers, but no one went to the store 100 years ago and bought dog food per se. So dogs were not on a schedule of 7 o'clock breakfast, noon lunch, and 6:30 dinner. They didn't have that schedule. And prior to dogs even being thrown scraps, dogs have been incredibly successful as a species scavenging, but they're actually amazing hunters, but they're not stealthy enough to get food every day at a certain time. So for the last 10,000, 20,000, and 30,000 years, dogs have gone through periods where they were unable to eat, and their body does a beautiful job of carrying them perfectly metabolically along in a state of ketosis until the next time they can catch a rabbit, or the next time some lovely person shares their dinner, or the next time Farmer Jones shares leftovers with the dog. So dogs have no problem going through these periods of not eating in a day. What happens is, as humans, as moms and dads of dogs, we believe that dogs have to eat at a certain time. And I can't tell you the number of my own clients that say, I force my dog to eat breakfast in the morning by adding Parmesan cheese and hot dogs and stuff to their food to make them eat breakfast. And my thought was, if a dog doesn't want to eat breakfast, I think we need to honor their physiology and let them. And she said, not just she, all of the majority of my clients are females, but women have a much harder time, traditionally speaking, with this than my male clients do, because my female clients say, listen, I'm going to go to work and my dog will not have eaten until I get home at, let's say, 3:30. And what I ask is, on the weekends, if you let your dog pick when they want to eat, what time will they come and tell you, hey, I'm ready for my first meal of the day? Most of my clients will say dogs get hungry anytime between 4 in the afternoon and midnight. They start to produce gastric juices. They want to begin the idea of thinking about, they're sniffing around the kitchen. They start pawing you and letting you know, hey, I'm ready to eat. That follows a very natural circadian rhythm of a dog, where dogs, traditionally speaking, would hunt as the sun goes down. So they tend to gear up for digestion later in the day. A lot of dogs don't want to eat breakfast. Now, your listeners are going to say, listen, I have a Labrador. Now you have to remember, a lot of our dogs have been genetically manipulated the last 500 years, and some dogs are actually missing the gene for satiety, for being full. They're missing the fullness gene, like Labrador retrievers. They literally don't have an off switch. So we're not talking about genetically damaged dogs who will just literally eat the kitchen sink because they're genetically missing genes. We're talking about the average dog that if he wants to skip a meal, it's okay. And one of the things we talk about in the book is intentionally giving your animal an eating window where they're able to eat one or both of their meals during a set period of time that allows for ample opportunities for their bodies to repair and restore themselves, rest and repair. When we talked to Dr. Sachin Panda, who runs the Circadian Lab at the Salk Institute, he was very clear with what his idea of, I hate the term calorie restriction, so I don't like that term, but we're going to call it time-restricted feeding, which means there's no such thing as calorie restriction. It's not a diet. There's nothing fad about it. It's honoring an animal's biologic clock. And what Dr. Sachin Panda said to us was, you make sure you get all of your dog's calories in within 2 hours of going to bed. Because what happens is, if we eat right before we go to bed, our entire nighttime circadian rhythm gets messed up. And dogs also do best if they're able to get their calories in, go on a walk after dinner, no food coming in, and then going to bed on an empty stomach. So those research papers we put front and center in the book, because that's not an intuitive way to feed animals. And yet the research is so profoundly clear that if you can stick to scheduled feeding and allow this rest, repair, restore cycle to kick in, you're able to actually dramatically improve how well your dog is able to perform autophagy and house cleaning and cellular damage repair and the recycling and the expulsion of toxins. There's dramatic improvement, and it's free. So one of the reasons that we really wanted to incorporate this common sense, kind of following a dog's natural circadian rhythm of feeding dogs when they're hungry. So let's just say you happen to have a dog that really wants breakfast. Cool. That first meal of the day, let's say you feed him at 7, you're going to get the second meal in within 8 hours, and then your dog is done eating for the day. So whether you make your eating window in the morning, middle of the day, or later in the day to evening, it doesn't matter. The key is set an eating window that works for your schedule and works for your dog, but then stick with it. By sticking with it, you're harnessing nature's benefits of autophagy that for free you can dramatically improve the health span of your animal just by altering the time that you're feeding. And that was eye-opening to Rodney and I, enough to think that even if you're broke and have no money and can't afford to even switch foods, Dr. Sachin Panda said even the best food fed at the wrong time becomes junk food to our body because of the hormones that the body has to produce to digest that food when it wasn't ready and able to do so. Likewise, bad food can be made better by honoring a time, a set eating window, a time set specifically for digestion. Set that and then stick with it. I think the hardest part is, as guardians, we have a hard time with boundaries and saying no.
Yeah, no, I can definitely vouch for that. Where I have one of the dogs, like you talked about, an Australian Shepherd who will just keep eating and eating of foods in front of her. So I think it would be harder on me than on her to implement something
Yeah.
like this. But I'm definitely gonna give it a go and figure out what that looks like for us and change that pattern up. But I think I just want
Jesse,
to highlight a couple things
yeah.
there that you said that are key. One is to not have the dog eat 2 hours before bed, and then two, try and get the feeding window, all the meals, whatever that is for you, whether it be one or two, within that 8 hour window throughout the day.
Yeah. And listen, Jesse, if you've got a lab, if you want to do 6 little meals, some people say, listen, I have a snacker. My dog, I have a 3-pound Yorkie and she only wants to eat 1 bite of food. No problem. You can even leave the dish out. If you want to leave the dish out for 8 hours, so you put the dish down and your dog wants to take 1 bite and then 20 minutes later, a second bite, no problem. But 8 hours later, the dish comes up and you're done. So if you want to put how you split up your dog's daily calories doesn't matter. You can do calories all in one meal. You can split it up into 2 meals. You can go to 8 little tiny meals. But the key is you're going to get all those 24 hours of daily allotted calories within an 8-hour eating window. Jesse, do you follow Dr. Jason Fung?
Yes. Yeah, he's been on the show 2 times. Yes,
Okay.
fantastic
Okay.
work.
So he's great. And we interviewed him for this time restricted eating or, creating an eating window for your dog. And he also had some really good valuable insights in that, you know, a lot of people will argue that this may be unnatural for dogs. And yet Dr. Jason Fung was really great about explaining that actually dogs are one of those species that we look to for, hey, they're capable of doing this and it works well with their physiology and they're healthier and better for it. I posted on my social media page a post about Jason Fung and the number of comments of humans that followed Dr. Fung's protocol, and not by changing their diet, not by dieting, and not by restricting calories. All these people did on my Facebook post, they said, listen, I followed Jason Fung. I lost 95 pounds. I lost 85 pounds. I lost 65 pounds. And all they did, Jesse, was compact all of their calories into 8 hours. And it's pretty fascinating when you see the research, both on human and an animal, about the physiologic benefits of getting a little bit of self-control and trying this, because they're pretty profound for mammals in general.
Yeah, which comes back to what I said early in the interview, where a lot of this stuff applies and overlaps between dogs and humans, which is great.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about food now. Let's add one more piece to the puzzle, and that's supplements. So now let's people have the type of food they're going to feed their dog, when they're going to feed that food. And we talked about what foods to avoid. We mentioned quickly, and I want to highlight this point, you want to make sure you're getting your dog on a clean water. We use a Berkey water filter system for our drinking water and give our dog that same water. And that's, to me, that's crucially important. But let's talk about other additional things we can add to that food to make it even more nutritious.
So supplements are interesting because I don't believe all life needs supplements. I do think that when supplements are warranted or needed, that they're a godsend and amazing. But I also see so many people start over supplementing, or Jesse, they use supplements in place of real healthy foods. So I think point number one is I think it's important if you're going to supplement your dog or cat, you'd want to know what you're supplementing for and why. Like there needs to be a basis as to why the intention behind giving a supplement. And it's very important that unless you're adding specifically supplements into homemade recipes that complete the diet, so let's say a calcium supplement or a vitamin E or vitamin D supplement for a nutritionally balanced diet, I don't recommend giving any vitamins and minerals per se in addition to those that you would be adding into a homemade recipe, because dogs and cats, if you're buying a commercially available pet food of any kind, it should say right on the bag, this food has been formulated to meet nutritional requirements, which means animals aren't lacking in those basic nutrients, those minimum nutritional requirements to sustain life. If your dog or cat is eating a commercially available food, they're getting some bare bone minimums. What they're not getting are the extras, like the antioxidants, which of course are very sensitive to heat. So you can only imagine with canned and dry food that's been heated 4 times at 300 degrees, there are no more heat sensitive fatty acids. So there's no omega 3s or those critical DHA and EPA to nourish cognitive health and to have a healthy immune system and to manage inflammation and for great skin and coat. Those are gone. So if you are feeding high heat processed foods like canned food, dry food, oven baked food, then absolutely adding back in things that are going to be cooked off are super important. So if you have to feed ultra processed food, adding back in a source of EPA and DHA, really a great idea. So EPA and DHA come from ocean sources. So squid oil, salmon oil, krill oil, algal oil, perna mussel oil. I do believe anything coming from the ocean, you want to ask your supplier for third-party testing. And I'm a huge believer in sustainability. So you want to ask for, make sure that it's sustainably sourced and third-party tested for contaminants. But here's the scoop. Dogs and cats can't convert any vegetable sources of omega-3s into DHA and EPA. So you have to supply the actual ocean source. Adding those in to any type of drier canned food is really important because there's not enough in there. The second thing that I would do if you have to feed ultra processed food is to give something to help remove those advanced glycation end products. Those are those high heat chemical reaction byproducts that are really bad for the body. If you're feeding a bunch of ultra processed food to your pets, then adding in the supplement carnosine is a good idea. Carnosine has been documented to help remove advanced glycation end products from your pet system. So the supplement carnosine is a great idea. The other whole food supplement that we could talk about is broccoli sprouts. If you say, you know what, I don't want to do supplements, broccoli sprouts have actually been demonstrated to also help remove advanced glycation end products. So I don't care if you give a supplement or if you want to do some broccoli sprouts, that's a whole food way of getting rid of some advanced glycation end products. But I would do something to mitigate those byproducts, those tag along things that really decrease health for dogs and cats eating dry and canned food. Carnosine is a good add-in. The other thing I would consider adding in is some source of microbiome building fibers. So whether you want to do a probiotic supplement or whether you want to do fermented foods or whether you want to add in kombucha or kefir, do something to build your animal's microbiome because they're not getting it with their food. So I think that probiotics, some source of gut building, beneficial good bacteria, and the fiber that those bacteria can use is a great idea, as well as fish oil, pretty important. Now, the one thing I'll mention, there's a lot of belchy, farty, gassy dogs out there. Digestive enzymes may be necessary for animals eating highly refined food. So if your animal's eating packaged shelf-stable food and is farty and gassy, there's a very good chance that they are enzyme deficient. So adding in a digestive enzyme may be of good benefit, not just for you and your home air quality, but also because your dog can better digest the nutrients in his food. So that may be another supplement that could be good.
And when it comes to enzymes, are we able to just open up like a capsule that we would take before a meal and give that to the dog, or are there special ones for dogs?
So dogs produce the exact same enzymes from their pancreas that humans do. They produce amylase to digest carbs, protease to digest proteins, and lipase to digest fats. But the difference is humans produce a lot more of those digestive enzymes than dogs. Dogs produce adequate amounts, but they're also evolutionarily, they benefited from eating unprocessed, unadulterated, unheated foods because raw foods still contain the enzymes necessary to digest those foods and then are also, of course, passed up the food chain. It wasn't until we started feeding animals entirely cooked diets that we saw, belchy, farty, gassy, a lot of GI issues come about. And so adding in a source of lipase, protease, um, and amylase is a good idea. What I would recommend, so yes, you can use humans. That's fine, Jesse. You can use human lipase, amylase, protease. If you get a human digestive enzyme supplement, you just want to make sure that there's not anything extra. Sometimes they come with zinc or other nutrients that I don't recommend. I don't recommend you add vitamins and minerals to your dog's diet unless you're doing a homemade diet and they need them. But otherwise, there are dog digestive enzymes, dog branded digestive enzymes, but they're the exact same type of enzyme as human. So you would just take a human enzyme product and scale it down for your dog's body weight
Got
and
it.
put it right on
Okay.
top of the food. Yes. Yep.
Perfect. And Karen, I think it was about a month or two ago, you posted on social media something that really caught my attention. And it was a teaser post, and it had to do with ionic silver and colloidal silver. And ionic silver is not something I'm familiar with or have used for myself or for my dog, but colloidal silver is. I've used it topically to spray in my dog's eyes when she's had some stuff going on in her eyes. And I've used it internally as well. So I'm just curious. It sounded like there was some controversy there. So is this something that's safe to use? And is it something you recommend?
So silver is a very potent antimicrobial. No one's arguing that. I use it for the exact same purposes, Jesse. I use it for eye infections. I use it for ear infections. I use it actually between the toes if animals have yeast infections. I use colloidal silver to disinfect hot spots because of its potent antimicrobial activity. We also use it in veterinary medicine. So it's interesting. Sometimes I'll have conventional veterinarians say, "Oh my gosh, that colloidal silver." And I say, "Do you use SSD ointment?" And they're like, "Yes, of course." And so all of our burn creams in veterinary medicine are silver based because it's a very effective way to manage bacteria, some viruses, but primarily funguses and bacteria are under the influence of silver topically. It's amazing. But they're also under the influence. They do an effective job of removing bacteria on the inside of your body too. So, where the controversy comes in, Jesse, is that sometimes people are unaware that it basically is a natural antibiotic. And we love that for infected pieces and parts on the outside of our dogs and cats' bodies, or even ourselves. Love it. Just as you would not get up every day and take an antibiotic pill for your overall well being, you recognize that antibiotics are sometimes necessary and warranted, but you would want to pick and choose when you use antibiotics wisely because they totally disrupt your microbiome. You don't just get up every day and take a wellness antibiotic. And yet, people that get up and take colloidal silver or give colloidal silver to their dogs every day, what the research is showing is that it absolutely can demolish your internal microbiome. It kills off bacteria. So when I looked at the comments on the post, it's interesting. People say, but it only kills off the bad bacteria. And that's the piece that scientists have been able to now demonstrate is that colloidal silver does have preferential categories of the types of bacteria that it's most effective at killing, but it doesn't just kill off the bad pathogenic bacteria. Colloidal silver does a good job at kind of wiping out your microbiome. So to answer your question, have I used it internally? I have. When I have had animals that have Helicobacter pylori, which is the bacteria that creates ulcers, I will use it short term as a natural antibiotic to kill off Helicobacter for my patients that are struggling with that ulcer bacteria. But I don't recommend that you get up every day and take an antibiotic if you're a vitally healthy, amazing dog, cat, or human. I don't recommend you get up every day and take anything that does a good job of decimating bacteria because actually our microbiomes are filled with billions of beneficial good bacteria that we don't want to obliterate every day with a dose of colloidal silver. Make
That
sense?
makes sense. Oh, totally. And just because I'm not familiar with ionic silver, is that a different product?
So it's different in how it's made. And I'm not, it's interesting. There's a lot of people that have how colloidal silver is manufactured, made, and refined. There's actually way more than two different techniques, and I'm certainly not a colloidal silver expert, but it has to do with how the silver is suspended and manufactured. And there's actually more than two different techniques. There's a lot of different techniques with how colloidal silver is manufactured, which in turn sets how viable and potent it is, and that in turn sets how effective it is as an antimicrobial. We also have to remember that because it is, it's silver, consuming silver in terms of a bioaccumulation is something that we may or may not have to consider depending on how long we're giving colloidal silver to our animals. So I love colloidal silver. I just recommend people use it for an intention and a purpose. Just like any other supplement, you would want to know why you're using it and for what purpose so that you're making wise decisions.
And when you're talking about omega 3s a bit ago, you mentioned the fact, and this is something that was totally new to me when I heard you say it, that animals, or at least dogs, can't convert the plant sources over to DHA. So right away when you said that, started thinking about vegan dogs, and there's certain people out there that don't feed their dogs animal products. And then they also now we're learning they can't convert omega 3s over, which is obviously something that when it comes to human diets, people are concerned about when they're eating a vegan diet, making sure that they're getting enough omega 3s. So let's just talk about vegan dogs and your thoughts on that.
Well, knowing that we already covered the fact that when you're nourishing a dog as a species, we want high moisture, low carb, high protein, moderate healthy fats. Obviously, if we switch to all plant-based protein, that means all of the protein has to come from plants, but all of the carbs, of course, there's a lot of carbs in that food as well. So first of all vegan diets are, in terms of a macronutrient perspective, they're incredibly high in starch and sugar, and there's just no way around that. Unless you're buying an organic vegan pet food, then the glyphosate load by default is also off the charts. And we've actually done some third-party testing to validate that if you're going to make something be vegan, then at least you've got to be organic vegan because the pesticide load is overwhelming. But my biggest concern is that because there are not enough amino acids coming from plants to meet a dog's or certainly kitty's requirement, we have to then supplement with a bunch of synthetics. So basically, when you look at the back of a vegan dog food bag, there's a lot of carbohydrates and then a long list of synthetic vitamins and minerals that are necessary. So your dog is going to derive the bulk of their nutrition from man-made, lab-made supplements. And that has to be okay with you. Second issue is because dogs and cats both lack the ability to convert ALA, which are plant-based omega-3s, alpha-linolenic acid, they can't convert plant-based omega-3s ALA, which dogs and cats also have an ALA requirement. So dogs need some ALA, great, but they can't convert that ALA into DHA and EPA. So what happens is people say, no, there's plenty of omega-3s. In fact, right on the outside of all vegan pet food, it will say, we use flaxseed as a rich, or flax or chia seed as a rich source of omega-3s for your dog. And they're right. It's a rich source of plant-based ALA. The downside is your dog and cat can't convert any of that to the critical and actually undersupplemented DHA and EPA. So the only option vegan dogs have is to use what's called algal oil. And algal oil is oil derived from algae. It does not supply a dog's minimum requirements for EPA, but it can meet decoxyhexanoic acid, DHA. So that being said, if you insist on, so I have to just say out of ethics and premise that I believe that we should nourish animals in a way that resonates with their biology. And it's not our job as guardians to force our own nutritional opinions onto another species. I am myself vegetarian, and I don't believe I have a right in making any other species a vegetarian. That's my own personal choice. For people that do insist on making their dogs or cats vegan, their only option is providing algal oil to meet some DHA levels, knowing that all of those animals would be EPA deficient.
And being
I would
EPA
just say,
deficient long term, what would be the consequence of that?
yeah. Oh, well, so it's all those the EPA is that anti-inflammatory omega-3 that nourishes cognitive well-being and prevents neurodegenerative diseases and keeps skin and inflammation under control, and really critical for membrane and organ tissue stability. So I guess my baseline take home message is, if you're a vegan and you insist that everything in the home have to be vegan, I get it, but then honor the animal kingdom and just pick naturally vegan pets like rabbits. Rabbits are awesome pets and they want to be vegan. Like, if we could just pick pets or animals that we want to co-commune with, if we insist on having the exact same eating style, I believe it's best to pick animals that naturally have and align with the eating style that you are living in your home. So vegan owners should pick vegan animals, in my opinion.
Yeah, really important information.
Safer, kinder, nicer, more respectful. Yeah.
Karen, reading your book, one area that I'm definitely excited to up with my dog is the medicinal mushrooms. This isn't something I've given Goji a whole lot of. I've experimented a little bit with turkey tail, but realizing again through reading your book that these are safe for animals and safe for well, I shouldn't say all animals, but safe for our dogs. It's opened up, a whole wide range of possibilities, because these are products that my wife and I do use for ourselves, and now I'm excited to introduce those for Goji. So talk about some of the benefits and some of the unique properties if somebody was to include these with their dog.
So first of all, you are my very first podcaster in my whole life that wants to talk about mushrooms. I love this. So thank you for bringing up mushrooms. Mushrooms are there again. They're high on the list of food fear with pet parents because everyone knows that some mushrooms are toxic. So first, let's just say this, Jesse. Every mushroom that's safe for humans to eat from your grocery store, so whether they're culinary mushrooms or medicinal mushrooms, every mushroom safe for humans is safe for dogs and cats. Likewise, every mushroom that's toxic for humans is toxic to dogs and cats. So we can just level the playing field by saying toxic mushrooms are toxic mushrooms and toxic to everything. And edible mushrooms are edible for everything. So you don't have to fear, oh my gosh, is this mushroom safe? If it's in your grocery store, it's completely fine for your dogs and cats. Mushrooms are unbelievable because not only do they have all of this unbelievable prebiotic fiber, which is amazing at nourishing the gut microbiome, mushrooms contain glutathione, which is one of the most important molecules in terms of regeneration and longevity. And we know from research that as dogs age, the glutathione levels diminish. We also know that older dogs, hospitalized dogs, dogs that are sick, injured, or degenerating, they also have lower levels of glutathione. So mushrooms are one of the few food sources of glutathione. They also contain ergo and spermidine, which are two longevity molecules that help the mitochondria regenerate themselves. So mushrooms are little power-packed morsels that you can hide in your dog's food really easily. And so you can either buy dehydrated or freeze-dried mushrooms, you can buy fresh mushrooms, you can buy white button mushrooms or portobello mushrooms, any mushroom at your grocery stores a go. However, there are some mushrooms that actually offer some really key benefits. If you want to target the type of mushroom for what's happening in your dog's body, it's totally possible. So for instance, the mushroom, I'm not sure, what kind of mushrooms are you and your wife interested in? Like, are you guys doing lion's mane right now or turkey tail, or what are you two
We're into
taking?
lion's mane.
Yeah,
Lion's mane, chaga, reishi. Over the years, though, we've experimented with a lot of them.
so good.
The
So
adaptogens, the ones that are, really safe and easy to incorporate.
exactly. And those exact same principles you can totally do for goji. So for instance, lion's mane is the cognitive, it's the nootropic mushroom. So it's that smart pill mushroom that everyone's raving about because it prevents cognitive decline. It slows down Alzheimer's, both in animal models and in humans. It does a great job of keeping your brain revitalized, stimulates synapses, does a really great job with central nervous system support. So lion's mane is all the rage right now for humans and for dogs. In dogs, yes, it does slow down canine cognitive decline, but it also is really good for animals suffering from neurodegenerative diseases. So dogs that have degenerative myelopathy, which is the equivalent of ALS in humans, they do remarkable when we start them on lion's mane mushroom. So you can choose your mushroom depending on what's happening with your dog, which is also cool. Likewise, turkey tail mushroom, study out of Penn State shows that dogs are very predisposed to a type of splenic cancer called hemangiosarcoma. And dogs that had turkey tail mushroom instituted lived on average, Jesse, a year longer than dogs not taking turkey tail. So it's super cool. You can totally tailor what mushroom you want to give your dog for longevity benefits, cognitive benefits. As you mentioned, there's mushrooms that help with stress. There's mushrooms that can build your microbiome. There's kidney and liver tonic mushrooms. So I think part of the fun of experimenting with mushrooms is being able to tailor what mushrooms you want and for what specific health outcome you're looking for, because there's a mushroom for that.
Love that. And you make a good point in the book where this might seem overwhelming for people who are listening, all these different mushrooms, different supplements I can incorporate, but you don't recommend just throwing them all in the dish every day.
No,
It's important
no.
to taper on, taper off, and I think that's also good for us as pet owners, not to, pull out our hair trying to, keep adding more to the dish and figuring out new things. It's like, no, maybe for a few days I'm going to cycle this in and then I'm going to cycle something else in. So talk about why you're a fan of that.
First of all, I am a big fan of buy foods that your whole family can eat. That means your dogs too. So if you're going to buy a fresh pomegranate and take the time, pomegranates are a pain, but my gosh, they're little jewel-packed nutrient antioxidant powerhouses. So if your dog will eat a little pomegranate, Jewel, totally share it with your dog. And then when you go back to the store, and let's say what I love doing is trying new things. I go to produce sections of weird and wacky stores. I just for the first time was able to source Jerusalem artichokes. And I had read all about how they're like the best prebiotic fiber. It has the most inulin and it's like the best thing you can do for your gut. And then I finally saw it. They were called sunchokes. And I was like, oh, there it is. So I bought one sunchoke and I came home and I tried to sliver. It kind of tastes like a raw potato. It was like totally fine. Gave it to the dogs, shredded some up in my cat's food. Everyone ate Jerusalem artichoke until it was gone. And then I went back and experimented with a rutabaga, which the cat, Kitty said no, but whatever veggies I have in my fridge, I'm just going to, as I'm chopping them up for my salad or whatever, you're just going to share it with your dog. You don't have to go out and specifically buy things just for your dog. You're welcome to do that. But I would encourage you more so to buy healthy foods for your family and then share them with your dog. So whatever's in your fridge now, as long as it's not an onion, right? Or those high starch carby veggies, the other thing people say is, oh, I tried that with my dog as a puppy. She just didn't like it. What's fascinating, Jesse, is how our dogs' palates change. Dogs that have never been offered any fresh food, they won't even, the first time you offer a snow pea, they'll just push it around the kitchen or back up from it. Like, what is that? Dogs don't even necessarily know that it's food. It doesn't register that it's edible, but just keep trying it. Because it's so interesting. I rescued a dog on Christmas Eve last year, and he had only been on kibble for 13 years. And do you know that the night I got him, I offered him a little slice of apple, and he looked at it and backed up and was just confused. And the next day I ate another apple. And so as I was slicing it, I offered him and he picked it up and then dropped it on the floor, but then went back to it and tried chewing it. His face was the best. You could just see him work through this. Okay, I don't know what's in my mouth and I'm going to keep chewing, but I don't know if I like it. And finally he swallowed it. So just keep offering foods to your dogs, even if they don't originally like it. Just figure out your dog's palate by offering them a variety of different foods at different periods in their life because their palates change over time, kind of like ours.
Good advice. And Karen, how many pets do you personally have at home right now?
So my animal load is down to the lowest it's ever been. I have Homer, a Glenavermal rescue terrier, this rescue that I got, and then Krosno, an 18-year-old kitty, and then Bee and Callie, which are two kitties that are 13 and 10. So I have 3 kitties and 1 dog. This is the fewest amount of pets I've ever had.
And when it comes to food for them, do you buy all the raw ingredients and prepare that for them at home, or do you buy some of the raw food that's pre-made?
I prefer to make my own animals' food. When life is crazy and when I'm overwhelmed or when, you're going to work 80 hours a week, that is not going to be feasible. I like to make my animals' food like 2 months at a time. And if I know I'm going to have a crazy upcoming schedule, I'll try and get pet food made in the fridge for at least a month so that I don't have to think about making it. When life gets crazy, I will buy commercially available raw food for them. Yes, but I prefer to make it. Yeah.
That might be something I take on within the next year. Things are busy right now. We're moving. We have another baby coming,
Yeah.
but I can see how you could take the quality to the next level and how rewarding that could be if you learn about it and do it properly.
The other thing I want to mention is that a lot of people think it's like this all or nothing thing. They're like, listen, all this is great. She just made me feel really guilty that I'm feeding crappy food. I don't need this. Remember, just as like if we decide, you know what, I'm going to start cleaning up my lifestyle, it's not like you have to throw out everything in the pantry and start all fresh. It's just when you go to the store, just make different snack choices, right? Like just you're going to buy more produce and less stuff on the inside of the grocery store, more stuff on the outside in the refrigerated section. The same is true with our dog's meals. That let's just say out of the 14 meals you feed your dog a week, you may feed 4 kibble, but what if you could swap in 1 or 2 homemade meals? Or what if you could swap in 1 or 2 dehydrated or freeze-dried meals? Or what you can totally mix and match. It's not like you have to do one thing. The other thing, Jesse, is we mentioned this briefly. Let's say you can't afford to switch your dog's food. You can just add in healthy toppers and dramatically improve the well-being and nutritional status of your dog. So, incrementally improving your dog's bowl, either by switching brands or switching categories of food from ultra processed to, let's say, minimally processed food, or by throwing in an uncooked meal now and then, or a homemade meal now and then, or a gently cooked meal, just swapping out ads, especially if you've got a refrigerator full of food that you want to use up and you're like, hey, you know what? I've got a bunch of raspberries and I don't know what I'm going to do with them. Start using raspberries that week as treats for your dog. And if you start thinking about just incorporating what's already in your fridge as dog treats, you can go a long way on not increasing your budget and yet really diversifying your dog's nutrition.
Well, Karen, we're coming up on an hour and a half here, and we've basically primarily focused on food, which was something I definitely wanted to go deep on. And I think we got really comprehensive in that realm, and I'm happy we did. But I have a list here of other things to get into with you, such as vaccines and cleaning dogs' teeth and flea and tick medication, and it goes on and on. So, what I'm proposing, and I've never actually done this except for the first time we interviewed you, is that we take a pause here and then we come back and chat again soon and get into some of these other topics. I think this is a good
Yeah.
place to wrap up and
Yeah.
part ways. And again, I'm happy we went deep. We covered a lot here when it comes to food, and I'd rather go deep and take our time.
Well, and I think that that's a brilliant strategy because food is super important. But Jesse, movement and genetic predispositions and environmental stressors, both veterinary chemicals and environmental home chemicals, all those things play into well-being in addition to food. So I agree with you. I think that food is a fantastic place to start, and I think it's super important. It's something we're doing on a daily basis, but we can't forget all of the other aspects that speak into our dog's lifespan and health span that are really important to make wise decisions because they play into your dog's well-being equally as much as food. So we want to make sure that we cover those. We'll have to do it at a different session though.
Yes, yes. We've gone quite a while here. I appreciate your time. I think a great place to end, you mentioned the fact that you gave a case study there of a dog that had lived to about 30 years old. So, being the topic of the new book is the forever dog, how long can I know it depends on the breed and a lot of different factors, but that's a remarkable, and I know we're talking on the high end, that's a remarkable lifespan. And again, we could keep going on and on. We could talk about health span versus lifespan, but let's just stick to lifespan right now. When we start making some of these changes, upgrading the diet, upgrade the lifestyle, how long can dogs, how long can they live in a general sense?
It's a great question. Purina did a lifetime dog study on calorie restriction. And so I want to start there because first of all, it's Purina. It's the fastest food of all the fast food. Uh, Dogs eating ultra processed food, so they're eating dollar menu food their entire life, just by restricting their calories and maintaining those dogs at their ideal body weight by feeding them a little bit less every day, they were able to add 2 years, Jesse, onto those dogs' lives. Not 2 years. Not by even incorporating fresh foods that have anti-cancer benefits and that are nourishing to the body and that do amazing things at intentionally helping the body scavenge free radicals. None of that. So if we can get 2 years life extension by just doing one thing, like maintaining our dog's body weight, imagine what we can do if we do add in intentionally healing, nourishing foods, if we do remove the environmental chemical insults that we know trigger epigenetic changes that are not good in our dogs. What if we do things to address air and water quality and minimize chemicals that we know potentially can play into what the Broad Institute causes or lists as the top reasons for early degeneration and death. If we put all of these things together into intentionally creating a life for our dogs that is healthier and on a day-to-day basis continue to make wise lifestyle choices, our estimates looking at this is that everything together could increase our dog's lifespan by at least 3 to 4 years. And the more that you do, the more beneficial results can come about, pending no genetic deletions. And we'll have to talk about genetic deletions next time, but there is a heartbreaking topic having to do with dogs just missing the genes to be healthy. And if your dog is missing genes for organ function, they're going to die of organ failure, and that's a heartbreak. So pending no genetic nightmares, there's so much we can do, Jesse, to not just extend how much longer our dogs live, but extend how healthy they are in their bodies as they're going through life, which means they don't get as sick, their bodies stay resilient, they're not degenerating midlife and getting lifestyle-related diseases, they're thriving for longer in a healthier body. So both of those things can be accomplished by paying good attention to all the variables that we need to be thinking about as guardians. And that's what the Forever Dog book is about.
Let's end it on this because there might be somebody listening now. I'm sure there's a number of people that their dogs are getting up in age and maybe they're 10 plus years old right now. And they're just learning about all this. They've been feeding their dog kibble and doing a lot of the conventional things when it comes to raising a dog. Is like what kind of changes can take place if somebody starts applying the diet and some of the other stuff we're going to get to later on in life for the dog?
I think that that's probably the number one question we get is, I think it's too late for my dog. And so will tell you that Blessed Homer at 13, he is having full-on lifestyle uh, refreshment right now as a senior/geriatric dog. First of all, I'm a proactive wellness veterinarian, so I can't not do that. Everything in my life is living proactive wellness because it's who I am. It's what I eat and breathe and sleep and research and what I'm passionate about. So by default, if you live with me, you're under this influence. But the fact remains that every positive step you can take in terms of minimizing the variables that become metabolic or physiologic roadblocks for your dog, every step that you can take to minimize those is going to make the road and path to extending health span and lifespan easier. So above all, Jesse, we have to put our heads on our pillows at night and say, I'm doing everything I can with the knowledge I have and the budget I have to be the very best guardian I can. And by doing that, Jesse, you have to owe it to yourself to do the best we can and then let yourself off the hook. By doing the best you can, what you have to recognize is that your dog is going to be healthier and probably live longer than they would have if you did not institute these changes. So the goal is do as much as you can within measure to be able to intentionally create health and wellness in your dogs. And by doing so, you'll reap the longevity and health and welfare benefits along with that. Do the best you can with the knowledge you have. The biggest issue is people don't know where to go to get the knowledge. That's the number one reason we wrote the book. People say, if I only had known this, tell me what to do. I don't know what to do. This is the very first book ever written, taking all of the top science on longevity and health, combining it with the researchers that have now reverse engineered the oldest dogs in the world. So we're taking the creatures, these outliers that are really long-lived dogs, and having the top world health and wellness specialists tell us how and why that happened. That blueprint is available October 12th. And what my prayer is that it's a gift to the dog loving community in the sense that everyone will be able to say, yeah, it's a lot of information, but I can just take one thing at a time as I have time and energy in my brain to do it. And I'm going to change the variables I can at a pace that resonates with me. And I'm going to work through all of these things until I'm at a place where I feel comfortable that I'm doing everything I can.
Well, it's an incredible book. It's going to help a lot of people. Other than people getting a copy of The Forever Dog, Karen, how can they connect with you after the show?
So my website is drkarenbecker.com, and Dr. Karen Shaw Becker on Facebook and social media is my website, and foreverdog.com is the book website.
All right, I'm going to link it all up in the show notes. Karen, it's been a real pleasure. We could keep going and going, but we'll take a pause here and continue this soon.
Thanks, Jesse, for hosting me.
Thank you.